woman named Naomi. Now, Naomi had, she could be on Hee Haw and sing the song, Gloom, Despair, Agony on Me. She'd lost her husband. She had lost both of her sons. So now she is a lady all by herself in a foreign country. She has no husband. She has no heirs. And on top of that, she has two daughter-in-laws. So now, unlike in our society today, where that would be fine and the sky's the limits and all that other stuff, in that day and time, the sky was not exactly the limit for a single woman with two daughter-in-laws who no longer had husbands. As a matter of fact, their options were pretty slim. And so Naomi tells both of her daughter-in-laws, girls, look, go back to your family. Maybe you'll get another husband. Go back to your family. That way you'll be provided for. I don't know what's going to happen to me. I'm just going to go back to my home. And you guys are released from any obligation you have and just go and do that. And that sounded good to the first daughter-in-law. But the second daughter-in-law, her name was Ruth. And she basically said, look, where you go, I will go. As a matter of fact, in Ruth chapter 1, verse 16 and 17, but Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. Now I want to ask you a question. How many of y'all think that Naomi was the type of mother-in-law that we see portrayed on so many TV shows where, oh, you know, everyone loves Raymond's mom times 1,000. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Does that sound like, does Ruth sound like she's describing that kind of person? What kind of relationship must Ruth have had with Naomi in the fact that she's like, nope, I'm going with you? Does anybody else get the sense that there was a strong bond there? There was a love there. And now we don't know a whole lot about it, but we do know that the way Naomi treated Ruth and the way Ruth treated Naomi, they loved each other. So let's just think about that for a minute. And I know there are a lot of jokes about mother-in-laws, and I'm going to avoid all of them right now because we video these, and if Sally's mom ever figures out how to use the internet, she might watch it. I have great in-laws. I have great, my kids have married people who I have great relationships with their moms and dads. And so it's just awesome. But let me just say to you, if you are somebody's in-law and they dread when you come, get to the bottom of it. Go figure out why. Go talk to them. Buy them a cup of coffee. Say, hey, look, have I offended you? Is there a reason that we're not getting along here? Because we have this person in common who we both love. Now, I do think that one of the things that comes up here, and just to say plainly, we have to put boundaries in our life, right? When a husband and wife join and they separate from mom and dad and they go over there, it doesn't mean that every relationship is severed, but every relationship is changed. Because now, just like how I have to put God first so that I can put everybody else where they need to be, in a marriage relationship, I have to put Sally before I put any other relationship. Even a relationship that I've had longer, maybe with my mom or my dad. We all have to do that. And that is a really difficult thing. It happens in marriages. It can happen with our children. It can happen in any type of relationship. So I'm throwing that out to say, if I'm reading this correctly, it wasn't like Ruth was going, man, Naomi, oh man, I can hardly wait to get away from her. She was like, no, wherever you go, I'm going to go. And I think you could read a lot into that. Okay, so the rest of the story, this would make a great movie. And maybe there already is a movie about it, I don't know. But these two ladies are traveling across country in a time when that probably wasn't, that wasn't the accepted thing, and they go all the way. They go all the way to her hometown, Naomi's hometown, and they're trying to do what? They're trying to figure out what God has already figured out. Folks, some of you and me, we're trying to figure out what God has already figured out. Okay, So the good news is God's already got it figured out. So what we need to do is just find out where he's wanting us to go instead of trying to figure it out for him and then say, hey, would you bless this? So Naomi and Ruth are trying to figure out what God has already figured out. They reach Jerusalem. It's barley season, barley harvest season. And so in order for them to eat, Naomi says, now, Ruth, just if you'll go over to the barley fields, these are the fields that are in our family. And so just go there, identify yourself, and they'll let you gather up, harvest stuff. So Ruth chapter 2, verse 4 through 9. Just then, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvester. Now, I don't know what Boaz looked like, but apparently to Ruth, he wasn't all that bad looking. She thought, okay, hey, this is cool. And he's handsome too. The Lord is with you. The Lord bless you, they answered. Boaz asked the overseer of the harvest, who does that young woman belong to? Now, this tells me she must have been okay looking. He didn't go, what's that thing over there? He said, who's the new girl, What is this? Who does this young woman belong to? The overseers replied, she is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi. Obviously, the story had already reached out that Naomi's come home. She lost her husband. She lost her sons. One of her daughter-in-laws went back to, but she brought this one girl with her. She was a Moabite. Her name was Ruth. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvester. She came into the field and has remained here from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter. All the things that he's saying here about Ruth are pretty cool. Number one, she asked. She was polite. She has a right to be here. And you know what? She didn't stop working. She got here and she's been working the whole time, except for a short rest she took. So he's not, she's lazy and she's kind of sitting over there taking a lot of breaks. Okay, so Boaz goes over and says to Ruth, my daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field and don't go don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work with me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you, and whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars that the men have filled. Now, I don't know, ladies, any of y'all go, man, that's nice. This dude, he walked over and he said, look, honey, I've already told him, ain't nobody going to mess with you. I've told him if she wants water, you give her water. Don't be ugly to her. Don't be mean to her. Don't give her a hard time. Don't even look at her crossways. That was the message that Boaz gives to Ruth. Well, that's pretty cool. That's, like I said, this is a great story. Eventually, Boaz follows the tradition and protocols of the day, and the guy gets the girl, and they live happily ever after. Okay, there's a lot of stuff that happens in between there about, putting a blanket over your feet and all that stuff. It's not a current dating tradition, so we're not going to worry about that. But suffice it to say, Ruth chapter 4, 9 and 10, Boaz steps up and he becomes her kinsman redeemer. Guess what Jesus is for you and me? He's our kinsman redeemer. We were basically hopeless, helpless. We had no prospects for anything. And Jesus comes up and says, Mike, look, I've already told everybody, let him be. You want a drink of water? Come over here and drink. You want to grab this? Nobody's going to bother you. I'm with you. Ladies, that's what Jesus has done for us. Men, that's what Jesus has done for us. He is our kinsman redeemer. So let's look at the rest of the story. Ruth chapter 4, verses 9 and 10. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, and as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses. So not only do Boaz and Ruth live happily ever after, they have a son. And their son has a son, and then their son's son has a son, and they named him King David. So if you're God writing this story, how many of y'all write a story from the beginning to the end? See, I think God writes stories from the end, and then he kind of works back the details. Now, I know he's smart enough that he could do it from anywhere with his eyes closed, but I tend to look at a story from the front going towards the exciting conclusion. God's exciting conclusion was there's going to be a king, and his name is going to be David, and he's going to be a man after my own heart. And you know how I'm going to make him come out of all of this? How I'm going to create him? I'm going to go up a few generations, and I'm going to bring together this Moabite girl named Ruth, who's lost her husband, and this man named Boaz, who's an honorable man, and I'm going to put them together. And in order for that to happen, well, I've got to go back here, and I've got to adjust some things like that. And that's a theme all through the Bible. Another story that we see in the Bible is the story of Esther and Mordecai. And in the book of Esther, we see the story of God using a man, his legal guardian cousin, and a non-Jewish king to save God's people. Now, if you've not read the book of Esther or the book of Ruth, let me encourage you to go. Here's the basic story set up. King, and I want to say Ahasuerus, whatever, I don't know. The king had a beautiful wife he loved. Now, I can say her name. It was Vashti. What? Vashti. Vashti was a looker, and he liked to show her off. And one day he said, Vashti, come in here and look beautiful, which is what you're supposed to do. And she said, I'm just not in the mood. And he said, okay, fine. You may never come in my presence again. And then at some point he realized, I really need a wife. A good-looking wife. So let's go out and hey, everybody, just go find me the best-looking wife. And so Mordecai enters the story. Mordecai is a mid-level person in the kingdom. He actually came over whenever King Nebuchadnezzar conquered them, and so he's a slave basically, but at the same time he has the ear of the king. He even at one point uncovers a plot to assassinate the king. Look, I'm telling y'all, if y'all don't read the Bible, there's some exciting stuff in there. So he finds out, okay, well, Queen Vashti has been banished from the king's presence. They're looking for the new queen. And, Esther is beautiful. Man, she's my cousin, and I think she's beautiful. So he gets her in the running, in the Miss whatever pageant, and she wins. And now she's this beautiful new queen who happens to have Jewish heritage. And she has a cousin who she loves very much. And y'all are thinking, what does this have to do with family? It has everything to do with family. Their relationship was such. She'd had no mother and father. She had nobody. And cousin Mordecai took her as her own. Some of you have done that with family members that you have. You've basically gone and just taken that person. And look, it doesn't matter how we're related or how we're not related. Some of you have people who you call Uncle so-and-so or Aunt so-and-so that aren't really uncle or aunt. You've brought them into your tribe, and that's what's going on here. So we find as the story goes on, and I'm not going to read the entire chapter, but I promise you, this is what it says. You should go check it out yourself. Mordecai finds out that Haman, who's the bad guy, every time we say Haman, you're supposed to boo hiss. Haman wanted to kill Mordecai. Oh, and let's kill all the Jews while we're at it. And so Mordecai contacts Esther, and they have a conversation via a slave. And Mordecai says, look, Esther, you're going to have to go and you're going to have to stand up for your people to the king. There was a problem, though. You couldn't just waltz into the king's palace anytime you wanted. You had to wait until you were summoned. And so she went one day and she said, okay, I'll do it. After Mordecai had said, maybe it's for such a time as this that you've been placed in here. And so she comes and she stands where the king can see her. And of course, I'm sure she wore her best clothes that day. She probably wore the most attractive thing she had. And she walks up and the king sees her and he says, oh, wait. Everybody stop. My new queen is sitting out there and she looks really, really nice. So come on in here. And it's a series of, I just want to fix you dinner, you and Haman, I just want to fix you dinner. And the next night, I just want to fix you dinner. And then eventually she goes, oh, and by the way, there's somebody who wants to kill all the Jews and I'm Jewish. And he says, I'll have his head. Who is it? And she points at the other person at the table. It's him. Again, we see a story of love, trust, loyalty, commitment in these family members. Well, man, how am I supposed to treat my family? I'm supposed to love, trust. I'm supposed to be loyal to them. I'm supposed to put my family above everything else, including myself.